If you're training regularly but still feel like you're not progressing, then this video will probably explain why. And before you assume it's not because you're doing enough or you're missing something obvious, it usually isn't that. And in fact, most of the athletes I work with aren't stuck because they're lazy or inconsistent. They're stuck because they're trying to solve the wrong problem. So most triathletes assume that if progress slows down, the answer must be to do more. More sessions, more intensity, more structure, or copying what other people are doing. I see this happening constantly with athletes. For them, more is nearly always the answer. And on paper, that makes sense because social media is full of helpful advice about what you should be doing. Athletes are constantly told that improvement comes from adding things. Add drills, add speed, add endurance, add strength work, add mobility work. But in real life, especially if you're balancing training with work, family and everything else, adding more often creates friction and confusion rather than progress. And what tends to happen is this: training starts to feel messy, confidence drops, and you're never quite sure whether what you're doing is actually right for you. And that uncertainty is what stalls progress, not a lack of effort. Coaching athletes day in, day out, I see the same pattern over and over again. The athletes who struggle aren't the ones who don't care. They're usually the ones who care the most. And triathlon is a world of compulsive obsessives, and it usually attracts a certain kind of person. Usually high achievers who don't mind working hard to get what they want. They're reading, watching, listening and trying to make good decisions, but they're holding too many options in their heads at once. It becomes noisy and confusing. Now, if you compare that to the athletes who move forward consistently, they don't train more, they don't have perfect weeks. What they do is have clarity. They know what matters right now and what doesn't, and what they can safely ignore. And once that clarity is there, consistency becomes much easier. Not because they're more disciplined, but because the training fits their life. And simplicity is usually best here. Keeping things simple and being consistent, that's what works. So we've coached hundreds of athletes across the last decade or so, and in my experience, progress in triathlon usually comes down to a few simple principles. First, fewer decisions. If every week feels like you're reinventing your training, that becomes exhausting. Secondly, the right level of structure, not the most advanced plan you can find, but the one you can actually repeat. And third, flexibility. Training works best when it can adapt to real life rather than falling apart the moment something unexpected happens. So none of that is exciting, none of it looks impressive on social media, but it's exactly what allows athletes to keep showing up and improving over time. I speak to my athletes at least once a week, and this weekly check-in is so valuable as quality coaching relies on good communication. And sometimes we have very little to talk about, and this is when training is settled, consistent, and relatively uneventful. It may sound boring, but these are the athletes who usually get the success they're looking for. They tick the days off and get the work done with few dramas. On the flip side, the ones I speak to and have daily WhatsApp chats with about the latest drama are usually those where training is a little bit disjointed and inconsistent. They're also the ones who usually underperform come race day. So if any of this sounds familiar, the important thing to understand is that you don't need to change everything overnight. Often, the first step is about getting a bit more clarity about where you are right now and what support actually makes sense for you. And that's why we created the free Triathlon Success Blueprint. It lays out our framework without the noise. And if you've already read that, the training selector will help you work out what your next step should be without guesswork. And I'll post a link to both of these down below. So I hope this has given you some food for thought. If it has, please consider subscribing, and it will help us help more people just like you. Keep things simple and be consistent, and you will get the success you're looking for. See you next time.